Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of the Cover One Buffalo Postgame Show. I'm your host Aaron Quinn, along with my co-host here, Greg Thompson. Greg, how you doing today, buddy?
I am here. That's
Yeah,
about all I got.
you are. You got a cool shirt on too. So
Yeah, that's right. I got the gunslinger. Now I had this on last week, and I felt like it brought some good luck for the Titans game,
yeah.
and I had it on today. And as long as he was in the game, things were good. And then some not good things happened.
At this into this year, I used to be very superstitious and would do the same things I did all the time. And then this year, man, I just, you know what, this team just has numbed me to the point where I have no impact. There's nothing I can do. I've been cheering my butt off for so long that if I'm not, you know what I mean? Like if I'm not doing the right things, then I can't continue to do that. But I appreciate the effort of fans that do.
I'm not saying it's mentally stable or healthy for me to do that, but I still do it.
No, I totally understand it. Like I said, I've done it forever. But this year I chose not to. Let's get right into this here a little bit today because, you know, I think we all felt that this had the possibility to be a game that could get out of hand. I think that it was almost similar to the Titans, definitely a team better than the Bills, going to play them. We're on the road. They have superstars. The Bills don't have the superstars. And Bills had a chance to win this game right up to the last few minutes. And then in the most Billsy way, they find a way to just really hurt you again with a loss. And I'm just becoming numb to it. I said in the Slack channel, I compared myself to, for anybody that watches Game of Thrones, to Theon Greyjoy after Ramsay Bolton just broke him down into Reek. I am Reek. The Bills have broken me down. I have no emotion. I just sit there. I'm terrified. I always feel like something bad is going to happen, and then it does. How are you sitting there home on your couch watching this? Because you're pretty cool, calm, and collect, man. I feel like you might not have been.
Yeah, I'm the kind of guy that wears his emotions on his sleeves. I get into the game. I'm pretty good long term. I don't let anything affect how I feel, what's going to rationally happen in the long term trajectory of the organization. But game to game, I'm fully invested. I'm all there. I get lost in the moment of it. I want to understand what's going on and everything we can do to win that day, even if it doesn't really matter if we win. So the roller coaster of emotions today was so tough because, like you said, we came in, we were 10.5-point underdogs for a reason. We were in Houston. They have a lot of the flashy names. You have your DeAndre Hopkins, Jadeveon Clowney, J.J. Watt, Deshaun Watson, a lot of flashy names. Then we shoot ourselves in the foot twice. We muff a punt, give them free points. We go and have a punt blocked and the defense holds, but we give them 10 free points. And our entire recipe to this point has purely been on positive game script, positive turnover differential, positive penalties. We had some really dumb penalties and 12 for 104 yards on the day. All of those things equated in my mind, that's an automatic loss. Then all of a sudden the defense starts making some great plays. We get an interception. We get another interception. We cause a fumble and recover a fumble. We start to make some plays. So then all of a sudden you get built back up. We get to the point where we take the lead and you feel pretty good about it. And that, you know, we have everything going on with Allen. You have the long-term concerns there. And then to have it just come crashing back down in such a sadly predictable way, to be able to have Nathan Peterman throw the 15-yard out that he can't make to the far hash, and they baited him into it and picked it off for a 6-point, pick six. It just was really deflating on a game that I let myself get excited that I thought we were going to win.
Yeah, I know. I'm right there with you, man. It was the only point in the game where I was standing up off my couch, finally excited, figuring like, hey, you know what? They could pull this off. That'd be interesting. Much more fun show to get on and talk about tonight. And then, but here's the difference for me is years past, Nate Peterman throws that pick. My hat is flying across the room. I'm swearing, cussing, very upset. And this time I just I shook my head and sat down and I gave him a couple cuss words sent Nate Peterman's way and just sat back down and was just kind of like, yeah, like you said, almost predictable nature that was how it was going to end, unfortunately for us. So before we get into the details, you got into a little bit about the game. Before we get too deep into that, I do want to tell anyone here first time doesn't know who we are, doesn't know who Cover One is, definitely head over to cover1.net. Check us out. Check out all the content that the guys are putting up. Fernando is a beast when it comes to putting up content. I'm sure he's going to have a ton of content up this evening. Obviously, you're here. This is the podcast. You can go find us on iTunes, anywhere you get your podcast. Really subscribe over here on YouTube. Eric's always putting up videos. I think we're approaching over 800 videos now on the YouTube channel. That includes the podcast that we do live every Wednesday and after the game on Sunday, as well as stuff that Eric puts up all week long about breaking down the game itself. So definitely head over there. Head over to cover1.net. We'll get into a little bit more about Cover One after we vent here. This is a therapeutic venting session that I need after every week. So let's we got a new segment here invented. It's a brainchild of my co-host here, Greg. What we're gonna do every week is kind of start the show off. We usually kind of give you an overall feel for the game like we were just doing, but we're gonna go with our gruntled or disgruntled. And basically, we're going to tell you explain it for the fans.
I think it's important because I think the word disgruntled gets thrown around a lot. And obviously, if you can be disgruntled, then you can also be gruntled. And when I'm gruntled, I want to share it. And
you just want to say it.
Yeah, mainly I just want to say gruntled as often as possible. But when I'm disgruntled, it's out there and we want to share it. So it's something that we can stick to each week and understand how we could have felt during the week.
Yeah, and so this week I want to start off because I had messaged Greg sometime in the late third quarter, I think, and I was like, I've got my disgruntled for the week. I had it written down in my notes. I was already I felt like, all right, they might be able to come back in this game, but I'm pretty sure who I think is going to be my guy. And sure enough, I had to move somebody down, and we'll talk about it later. I'm not going to let him off the hook. It won't be brought him in this segment. We'll talk about him. But for my disgruntled, Nathan Peterman is my disgruntled. It's an easy one. It's low-hanging fruit, man. But, I defended this week that he was on the roster, wasn't cut as part of bringing in Derek Anderson, mostly just because I think it's impossible to get a quarterback caught up in 4 days and get him into the game plan, get him into the offense, and then throw him out there. I think that's super unfair to anyone. But at this point, there's just literally no reason that this guy should have a roster spot in the NFL, not just on the Buffalo Bills. And he proved that to me today. I don't get on McDermott a lot. I'm pretty into the process, as anyone that follows the show knows. If McDermott keeps Nathan Peterman on this team, it's really going to be the first time I question what he's doing with this 53-man roster, and both him and Bean, because one of those guys out of the two of them has to be able to look at this and say, this is toxic for the team. Like, no, there's no way anybody can believe that he can come in and take a snap in the NFL and not totally botch it. So it's terrible for the locker room. It's terrible for the team. And I'm done with Nathan Peterman. I don't ever want to see the guy play football again. I wish him the best of luck in his life. I feel terrible for the guy because I think it's just been a situation for him that just spiraled out of control. I think a lot of it's upstairs. I think a lot of it's just his arm. He doesn't have the ability to make the throws in the NFL. So Nathan Peterman's my disgruntled.
Obviously that's the right choice, and I'll bring up another name just for variety. But I think that he had a nice throw there. He threw a touchdown pass on a really nice throw to Zay Jones. It was there. He made a couple other decent passes.
Nicer route than throw.
Yes, he was correct. Great double move. Great double move by Zay. But he still threw it. He threw it over a jumping defender who had his hands up and was decent. And then to go back and in a critical area where, literally all we had to do was let the clock run and be able to, take it to overtime, try to make a play, and to be able to throw the pass that he did was just inexcusable. And the pass that I gave Peterman forever was that, hey, I know he doesn't have an NFL arm, but I think he has an NFL mind and can make the decisions there, that in a pinch, he can learn to be able to be a reasonable backup. And now I don't know how you can even maintain that hope. I don't know how you can assume that there's much of anything salvageable, not from him personally, but how can the team have any confidence if he goes in there? How can they have any belief? So that's the right choice. I'll give mine as an honorable mention to Ray McLeod. he was a similar player that I had kind of made some, excuses for, and that, well, he's a rookie. We got to let him kind of learn through this. But your first 2 touches, you fumbled the opening kickoff, and then you muff the punt. It's just you can't have that. We don't need explosive lightning plays. We don't need amazing game-breaking ability. You have to secure the football. That's by far your number one requirement as a return man. To do that on your first 2, that's something that I think can get into somebody's head, like getting the yips, and is something that gives me fear that he's ever going to be able to be sustainable in that role without having a really nice package here. I know obviously they put Micah Hyde back there the rest of the game. 2 games ago when he had this issue, they did put Micah back there for 1, but then gave him another shot later. Today they didn't. They didn't go back to him, and I'm worried that may be long-term.
I don't disagree that may be long-term. So for full disclosure, my original disgruntled was going to be Danny Crossman. And part of that was that Danny Crossman continues to put him in these situations and just the penalties. There's a long list of things I'd like to talk about Danny Crossman later on in this episode, but I think you hit it on the head with a good runner up there. One thing I want to question you, though, was I know he technically did lose the ball. It probably wasn't a fumble, though, the first on the kickoff. I thought he was down.
Yeah. Luckily, it got recovered, so it
doesn't matter, right?
On the replay, you're probably right. I think we probably would have maintained possession, but still, yeah.
It's a mental thing, right?
Yes, yeah. In his mind, knowing that, hey, I coughed the ball up, and then the other one, I mean, he never even really had it. It went straight through his arms, and he kneed the ball forward. I get concerned long term that that's something that gets in your head, and you can't have that issue when you're sitting back there waiting for the ball to come down.
No, you can't. But you do hope that some of these guys are mentally strong. Obviously, we were told that about Nathan Peterman. There's clearly some of that yips or whatever you want to call it in his head, and being my disgruntled guy. And hopefully that's not the case for Ray. Hopefully this is just a series of mistakes that passes by. We saw with Zay Jones last year, had a record-setting drop record. Zay's a guy right now. People are kind of starting to notice, is starting to take some steps forward. So I hope for the sake of Ray that he can get behind this, but I do think you're right in pointing out that might be something to watch. I'd be really surprised if he's back there anytime soon, fielding punts, and I think it's something to look for in practice this week. It's not something you want to have to look for in practice. Who's going to be fielding punts? But I think it's going to be something to keep an eye on all week.
Yeah, the hard part is I don't even know who the alternative is. I don't love Micah Hyde being back there. Arguably one of our most valuable defenders, the kind of the quarterback of the secondary, and already, kind of nursing his way back from a groin injury. I don't want him back there fielding those punts, but now I don't even know who the alternative is. I don't think it.
Jones.
I was wondering. I don't know if kick return translates to punt return the same way, but I'd be open to that. Taiwan's on the roster for purely special teams, so I'm perfectly fine giving that a shot. I don't know if that's something Robert Foster could give a shot.
Or Marcus Murphy, maybe.
Yeah, Marcus Murphy. But I hope that they take a look at one of those, and that honestly, if he's not back there returning punts, I question if McLeod even makes the active roster. I bet he may be inactive on game day.
He's going to have a tough time finding the active roster if he doesn't, unless obviously something we probably won't get into a lot of discussion on, but trade deadlines looming. So the wide receiver room could look different here in the next couple of weeks, and that might get him a spot. But I think he's going to have a tough time because as a wide receiver, Foster fills the role of the speed guy that they need, and he's barely getting reps on the opposite side of the ball. So you're not going to put both those guys on the final game day roster, especially if one that is supposed to be contributing in a way on special teams just isn't. Not only not contributing, but affecting your team.
Yeah. Just, and is obviously negatively impacting it.
Yeah, so that's one thing I did want to talk about, and we'll get to that later. Now, as far as my gruntled, because I know we want to talk about being gruntled and those things, I'm going with another, I think, low-hanging fruit. But for me, it's kind of a tag team. I'm going with Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott.
I like it.
What they've done with this defense since that infamous McDermott coming in and taking over the play calls, kind of putting a veteran coach on blast. People really looked into that and said, maybe it's time for Frazier to be gone. I think that they took that together as a team and said, let's game plan this. And it seems as though he's giving it right back to Frazier to do what he wants. And Frazier's really taking the ball and run with it. This defense is performing maybe the best I've ever seen since like the Schwartz defenses, the Patton defenses. We're back to that type of, this defense can create turnovers. They can create pressure almost on any play. They're playing aggressive, which it doesn't seem to be the McDermott way. We saw a lot of Raphael Bush blitzing in the first half. We saw a lot of different looks. They're not overloading you the way Patton would overload blitzes, but they're bringing in guys from different spots, and it's a really aggressive look, something that we didn't see in the first couple of weeks. And so my hat's off to those guys. I'm very gruntled with Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott.
Very similar. I simply wrote down old men on defense. So my gruntled for the week is our old men. It's Kyle Williams and Lorenzo Alexander. Those two 35-plus-year-old men, Kyle might be 34, are responsible today for 9 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 2 tackles for a loss, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 fumble recoveries between the two of them. Now, granted, there was a lot. I think Trent Murphy flashed multiple times, saw some nice disruption up the middle from Starr and Jordan Phillips. Our defense played phenomenal. We'll get into that. But just the play like that from 2 guys that, especially on defense in the NFL, you don't normally see that level of sustained production. And 2 people that I think a lot of people were maybe rightfully predicting a downturn have been phenomenal. I think this was Kyle's best game of the year, and I think Zoe has been consistently excellent all throughout the year. And it's just really encouraging to see that kind of leadership and that kind of production, that it's not just a token roster spot from a guy who isn't really capable of producing. He's just there from a leadership standpoint. Both Kyle and Zoe are producing and are there to be able to lead on the field and off.
Absolutely. And I was one of those people that was a little bit down on Kyle Williams going into the season, because it's more of just it's not and really anything against Kyle. It's more times undefeated. He's a guy that plays a very physical position. Usually those things don't add up to having this type of success this late in your career. For a guy like Kyle, he's been through a number of injuries, et cetera, et cetera. He had some injuries this summer. So I thought it was definitely going to be a down year for him. Totally wrong. He's still tossing offensive linemen just out of his way, still has the get off that he always had. Lorenzo Alexander is one that early in the offseason, I had him as a guy that could be a cap casualty for this team. That
wasn't crazy.
No, I didn't think it was. And I'm glad they didn't. And you mentioned all the plays that he did make. Eric had put out something on one of the pressures that Jerry, I think, got pressure on him. Somebody got pressure on him on Watson, but it was really because Zoe was sitting there playing contain, and he didn't allow Watson to get out of the pocket. And it's those things that don't always go noticed that these vets just do, and the awareness that they have. And on that tipped interception to himself, that was a awareness play. That wasn't Zoe being the best athlete on the field or anything like that. That just takes great awareness, great veteran leadership to just know where to be and what to do. And if you didn't get to the quarterback, you get your eyes on him and get your hands up and you make a play on the ball. And that type of awareness, man, it's invaluable. And people make fun of the idea of culture and all these things that the coach talks about. But those 2 guys that you just mentioned and the impact that they had on almost beating this team on the road, that is culture. Those guys are the personification of what McDermott's teaching. So I think that's a great choice by you.
For sure. No, I think they earned it and deserved it.
Yeah. And I do think, can we add Jerry to old guys yet?
He's right on the line. He's
teetering.
He's plenty old. I think if you're north of 30 and you're playing on an NFL defense, that counts. So I think that he gets credit.
All right, because he also dominated. So I'd like to just throw him in there with those guys, because he's just been dominant, man, the last 5 weeks of the season. So
yeah, another sack and a half from him.
Dude, he's playing fantastic, and I feel bad for those guys, and we'll get into it. So we'll get back into our normal flow of the show here, where we cover the units of the team, and let's get into the offense. I don't have a lot to say, to be honest, that we haven't already said on this show.
I'm all done. We could talk about defense now.
But I want to get into it because I think outside of the obvious stuff that we can see, obviously Josh Allen is still struggling. I've been somebody that's been preaching this incremental progress that I need to see from him. And I really didn't see it very much in this game. Things that I want to see have no impact on the stat line, but it's the not panicking in the pocket. It's the not dropping his eyes and taking off too soon. It's the not putting his body in situations. He put his head down and tried to run over a linebacker. I want nothing to do with that. He did get some okay successful runs, but I would have preferred if he stayed in the pocket. And one thing that we saw when Peterman came in, guys were getting open at points in the field, and that if you are a guy that has at least some vision, you could see that. And that was the stark difference for me, is when Peterman came in and had a few successful throws, it showed that guys are getting open. And that to me was just a sign that Josh Allen is just so panicky in the pocket, and he's not getting the incremental progress I need over this last 3-week period. I'm not talking just week to week, a 3-week period. What are you seeing out of Josh right now, man?
Obviously still a lot of indecision. I think that they even pointed out, James Lofton commented on during the game, that he's probably not going 1, 2, 3, 4 reads. He's probably going 1, maybe 2, and then pulling down and running. You could see a couple times. I know there was a pretty stark difference between Deshaun Watson and Josh Allen in when they get sacked. Deshaun Watson is always stepping up, falling forward, staying up close to the line of scrimmage. Very rarely is he doing that full back out rollout kind of thing. JJ Watt almost got Josh, I think 3 different times. He did get him the one time. But when he goes back, he's losing 8, 9, 10 yards a sack. Deshaun Watson lost 2, 3, 4 yards a sack. So some of those things do start to add up where, I want Josh to continue to build, be able to step up in the pocket. Obviously, like I said earlier, one of the upside that there was to Peterman was his ability to stay within rhythm and on target. Now, obviously, that was kind of fool's gold in the preseason, but the idea of that he made decisive, throws quickly in deciphering the defense where it was. He doesn't have the arm to do it. And now when real live bullets are flying and they start to disguise the defense, he's not as effective. But that shows you how much further Josh is even back from that, where I think that he's fairly easily confused by the defenses and the combo coverages or the disguise coverages. I think that he's thrown off relatively quickly and then has a bit of a hair trigger. And then, because it's hard anytime someone is successful at a poor skill, so whether that's someone you work with who's a jerk, but they get promoted by being a jerk, they're going to continue being a jerk because they think that's what's working for them. That scares me a little bit with Josh, in that the attaboys that he's getting and the attention he's getting is when he's running and hurdling players and diving for touchdowns and everybody goes crazy. Even subconsciously, that's in your mind. You're thinking that, oh, I must be really good at that. Everybody loves it when I do that. And I think you can coach it, but the instinct that I can do this, I'm the one that can make this happen for the team. I think he can be well-intended and put himself at risk. Like you said, the one play where, he literally tried to run over a linebacker. He didn't see the defensive tackle come in running at him, and Reeder, their nose tackle, is actually the one that made him fly off to the side, not Cunningham, the linebacker. But that's a perfect example where if he's just sliding, he wasn't that close to getting the first down. I think he was still 3 full yards short. If he just slides and doesn't take that hit, that's a much smarter play than assuming you're going to run that guy over and not having the peripheral to let that guy come in. So some of the, he tried to go deep a couple times. That was decent. I like that he was trying to make plays and keeping his eyes downfield. I know the one got called back on the ridiculous penalty by Patrick DeMarco on a 42-yard catch from Benjamin, actually keeping active on a route. So there was some positives to take from it, but still probably a net negative overall. He didn't turn the ball over. That's positive. He picked up a couple first downs running, but I would say today, I don't know that I saw any really encouraging throws from a long-term standpoint.
Yeah, I did like that. I like that he can use his legs. I don't want him to stop.
Agreed.
But I agree with what you're saying as far as kind of a picking and choosing your spots, because I think you have to be able to move. He showed it in that first drive, what you talked about, getting out of the pocket and going backwards. It can be a very negative thing, but for Josh Allen, this is part of the Josh Allen experience, right? It can be a very positive thing. In that first drive, he evades the sack and converts on a 3rd and 6. with a very Josh Allen-like play. He just kind of gets out of the sack, rolls right, I think, and then they convert the play, moves the ball. I thought that actually they had a really good first drive, and that was killed. I thought they had quick 3 points at least, and that was killed by penalties. And I think that is something else that's also killing this team outside of Josh Allen's development, is when you have a rookie quarterback that's developing and slowly developing a super raw player like this, and you don't have a ton of skill, the last thing that you can do is kill yourself. Even the good teams, the Patriots, the Rams, things like that, they can't afford to kill themselves on drives. So if they can't do it and they can convert on 3rd and 8s, the Bills can't do it because they're not going to convert on 3rd and 14s. And that's what ended up happening. And not only 3rd and 14, but a 3rd and 14 outside of field goal range. You end up losing the ability to put 3 points on the board on the road and get on the board first. And that to me is the type of stuff that's just going to kill this offense and kill momentum, because I think that for development of a quarterback, you want to kind of get momentum, go in, establish your will on this defense, put some points on the board, and get a little bit of confidence. And the offense and their penalties killed that right out of the gate.
Well, I mean, if you want to do a comparison, if you told me coming into this game that if you remove the first downs from penalties, we had more first downs, we ran more plays, we had more yards, we outgained the Houston Texans and DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson. That's crazy to be in the position that we were and to have so many, special teams issues, so many penalties where we gave up free yards, the turnovers, to put ourselves in that position. That's never going to be our recipe for victory. I've said it every single week. Our recipe for victory is going to be a positive turnover differential, positive penalty differential, maybe the toxic differential where you talk about plays over 20 yards. We're going to need positive things like that, and then use our defense to hang close and to tough it out. When we have situations like this, we're never going to be sustainable in doing that.
No, but that's something I do want to mention. People talked about the sustainability last week of the Bills beating the Titans and saying that wasn't a model for sustainability. This week, man, that same model got them in a position to win the game late in the fourth quarter. Granted, we had maybe the worst quarterback in NFL history come in and totally deflate that ability to win the game. But there is some sustainability to it, because I think you mentioned in the Slack channel, maybe recovering fumbles isn't something that you can teach, right? But they do make it a priority in practice to teach stripping at the ball, to not give up on plays, playing the ball in the air, all those things, creating pressure. That is something that you can have sustainability with. They've done it over the last 4 weeks. So there is some level of sustainability to the way the defense is playing.
Yeah, it's confusion by fans who are hearing there is a fair amount of science that goes into studies that have shown that recovering fumbles is pure luck. How it's an oblong leather ball that doesn't go in a normal direction. You don't know where it's going to go. And the luck of how that's recovered fluctuates greatly year to year and really nets out very much 50-50 on the grand scale, that the fumbling team recovers half, the defensive team or the other team recovers the other half. That simply is the way that it is. However, causing fumbles, it should not get lumped into that. That's not random luck. That is something that is caused by the defensive player striking the ball purposely and causing it to come out. So when you show that the Bills came into today leading the NFL with 16 forced fumbles, the next highest team was at 11, and then most of them were single digits. They got 3 more today. And again, as luck would have it, we recovered 1, they recovered 2, and that's the luck part. But we forced 3 more fumbles. That, like exactly like you said, that constant pressure, getting to the quarterback, being around him, and you can see that is not something that's just randomly happening. Every time any defender gets close to the ball carrier, the first thing they do is wrap with one arm, swipe at the ball with the other one, and they're punching at the ball, and it's a coached specific element that I think that, maybe we don't lead the league by double most other teams, but I think it's something that we can stay at the forefront of, and causing those is something that we can make somewhat sustainable, and then we just cross our fingers and hope that we pick them up.
And hope that the offense can do something
with
it. So we'll get back over to that side of the ball. I think we've talked about Josh Allen enough for today. It's going to be a long season talking about him. Real quick here before we go, have you heard anything on the injury front other than just the elbow? Did we hear anything about any timelines or what they're doing, any x-rays, anything like that?
I will say there's nothing official, and I would assume we are not going to hear anything official until tomorrow at the very earliest.
Great.
Short of, again, if we hear anything tonight, it's really bad news, because the only chance something comes out tonight is an Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter kind of scoop, which means it's major. So if we don't hear anything, I think that's a relative positive. The only thing that I can say is there are two guys online. One is Dr. Chow. The other one goes by Bruised Bills.
Banged Up Bills,
sorry. That are on Twitter that are pretty good at watching the slow-mo and the mechanism of what happened. Both of them said they didn't see a hyperextension, that it looked like a nasty contusion, which is just the formal word for a bruise, and that it looked like on your throwing arm, your tricep is your number one muscle as you're doing this. So if you get the idea of a terrible Charlie horse for a sprinter, you can't just get back on the line and run again. That's a major issue. So if you get a helmet to the tricep and probably the funny bone, he probably lost feeling in his hand when it happened, and then isn't able to throw. You saw him wince and drop in pain when he tried to make that next throw. So obviously, I think he had some really bad bruising, or I take that back. I'm hoping that it was just some bad bruising. I think they're obviously going to do an MRI. They're going to do all the proper testing to make sure that there's not any ligament damage or anything like that. But right now, the only thing I have to go on are reports of some educated, intelligent people that do that for a living, but they're just doing it from a snippet of video. Obviously, it's all speculation until we hear from the doctors.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're not following Banged Up Bills, definitely go do that. He's been on the show before. It's Kyle Trimble, a good friend of ours here at the show. Worth a follow for any of your injury news. So we'll drop that in for you. And if there is anything serious, we'll have him on for an emergency podcast to discuss. So stay tuned for that. LaShawn McCoy, pretty good day. 16 carries, 73 yards, 4.6 a carry. Still doing LaShawn McCoy type things. I said in the Slack channel, I think that he's maybe he's not. I think you said maybe he's not a top 5 back anymore, but I think he's still one of the most entertaining backs. I think he's still the special back that he's always been. The Bills have a much better record when he's getting more than 16 carries. This game was difficult, made by the special teams to really get him going early on. But they're also not getting him super involved in the passing game in this game. So we saw some production out of him. Didn't see a thing out of Chris Ivory today. So the running backs was just purely LaShawn McCoy. Got nothing out of Chris Ivory. What did you see out of the running back room, man?
Yeah, a little bit of what I said last week, where I didn't want to rain on the parade, because Ivory did have a fantastic game overall and had the milking the clock final drive carries that we needed. But I did make the comment that he does think he's LaShawn McCoy sometimes. We saw more of that today. A lot of dancing at the line of scrimmage, looking for a lane or a hole, which might get there, but he doesn't have the wiggle to do that. So it's kind of tough to be able to put himself in that position. So, it's fine. That's not what he's there for. And when we have games where he's going to be able to, contribute, he'll do that. But McCoy was, like you said, he was excellent again. We didn't get into a game script where we got to give him a lot of carries, but he made some really nice plays down the stretch, upward almost 5 yards a carry, over 4.5 yards a carry, a couple nice plays in the passing game, and made some moves on a couple of those. So, I think he was positive and just is limited in the situations we can put him in.
Yeah, it's true. And flipping over to the other skill position side here, pre-game, obviously, Kelvin Benjamin was all the talk on the Twitter from a report that came out that he didn't want to run routes. Josh Allen came up to him asking about routes. It's something I heard from our dear friend Uncle Frank over on the playground. I took my kid to the playground after the game, and Uncle Frank was real mad about that. That he didn't do that. But when I got home, I saw that maybe there were some conflicting reports about actually what was said. Benjamin said that isn't how it went. So we got a little he said, she said going on. I frankly don't care. End of the day, Benjamin comes out. He's 2 for 43 yards. One was called back, a long play to Benjamin called back. So he could have had a more productive day. He did look like he fought the ball in the air a little bit on that route that he did get called back. So I'll give him some credit there. I've seen some blocking for him. downfield. I do think that there's a chance Kelvin Benjamin's one of these guys. I watch a lot of basketball, and there's guys out there that look like they play really lazy, and you're like, what are you doing? But it's just who they are. It's just who the guy is. I think he's always probably been that way. I don't know that he's totally disgruntled here. He might just be that kind of guy and has always been that guy.
I think there's a piece of it that he's never going to be your, Tyreek Hill quick twitch guy. So he's never going to have those crazy shake and bake moves that make it look like, oh, he's really totally all into it right here, because it's obvious because the guy's moving at a world-class rate. He's always been a long striding big receiver who positions himself well and fights for 50-50 balls. Now, we've seen some plays that I think you can, within reason, question his effort after the route was broke down. But I think in general, even if he's playing at his top level of effort, it's not going to look the same as Ray McLeod playing at the top level of his effort. So there's probably a piece of that where he's set up not to look fantastic. But yeah, today was far from his worst game. That one doesn't get called back. You're talking about 3 catches for 85 yards. So, we certainly could be worse in what we're doing there. And I didn't have any blatant effort plays where he wasn't fighting back or coming back on route. So, today Kelvin Benjamin was far from our biggest problem.
Definitely. And I think that conversation will probably go on all week in that narrative. So we don't have to talk about that any further. One thing I do want to talk about when we're talking about the wide receivers here, and we'll get into the ball was spread around pretty well today. You had Charles Clay with 4 catches for 20 yards. It was nice to see him get involved. I'd like to see that a little bit more sustained throughout the game. Keep coming back to Clay. But Zay Jones, again, it's not a big stat line, 3 for 35, 11 yards a catch. But I do think that we are starting to see Zay, albeit slowly, starting to develop into a nice target and a decent wide receiver here. 2 catches early on, I think, were Josh Allen's fault. The really soft lob that Zay dropped, I don't think that drop was on Zay. I think he put him in a really difficult position, allowed the defender to get over there and make that very difficult for Zay to come down with that. And then Zay was open in the end zone. Josh missed him there. That could have been a nice play. He was in the position to make a play. But Zay Jones, it has been impressing me, man. I think people wrote him off too soon after one really, really bad year, plagued with some injuries. Where are you at with Zay, man?
I think you've actually won me over. I was probably closer to the side of kind of being out on him, or not out on him, but just not seeing much potential in the future. I will say, maybe the only player outside of LaShawn McCoy. LaShawn McCoy has his legacy intact. He's one of the greatest, a great running back, maybe not one of the greatest ever, but maybe he's in the top 20 running backs of all time. Beyond him, I don't know that there's any player on this entire offense, skill position wise, that I care if they're on the team in 2 years. And now I actually feel that way with Zay Jones. I feel like he has the potential to develop into probably that big slot guy, what the one productive year Jordan Matthews has. Not, I mean, at the high end, I'll say what Larry Fitzgerald has become. Now, I'm not comparing Zay Jones to Larry Fitzgerald, but the more, not the Julian Edelman slot guy, but now what a lot of teams are doing with that bigger slot receiver, taking advantage of those matchups. I think that he runs routes well. That touchdown was a phenomenal route, and that was a professional double move that he toasted that guy. So I would say he probably is showing the most promise of any of our offensive skill position players long term, which is probably both accurate and an indictment on the lack of weapons that we have. That, in my mind, in a good offense, he's your number 3 receiver, and hopefully with an athletic tight end, maybe your number 4 offensive passing threat. But at least I think he has that potential, and that if we can add the pieces around him, he deserves to be on the team long term.
Yeah, and I think that would be a great positive gain for the Bills right now. I'm thinking about the future, obviously, in these next 2 years of off seasons and drafts. People are really concerned about skill positions specifically and how they're going to do that. If Zay can actually step up and even be a third wide receiver on a really good unit, I'm all for it because you have him for another 3 years on his rookie deal. I mean, this would be the best case scenario for the Bills right now to not have to worry about getting 3 wide receivers, maybe only having to bring in 2 and just looking for that really number 1 target specifically, and then hoping somebody else develops into something a little bit better maybe than what Zay can do. But I think this would be a big win for the Bills if he continues on this development that he's had over, say, the last 3 weeks of the season right now. I'd like to see that continue to progress. I think they're trying to get him some more targets. So I think that's something to keep an eye on as far as if we pull back a little bit from the wins and losses and the heartaches that the Bills are making us go through right now, the long-term development of the young players. We have a lot of young talent that we're seeing develop. I think if Zay Jones can get into that group of guys that are developing, that are young, I mean, that's a huge plus for Brandon Beane in the front office.
Yeah, the final piece on offense before we flip over to defense, I actually thought the offensive line was outstanding today. We went through an entire game with 2 sacks, and both sacks were probably on Josh holding the ball too long and trying to make something happen. They produced great for the running game. We were making movement. They went up against a front of J.J. Watt, Jadeveon Clowney, Whitney Merciless, and some really, really strong front 7 players. And I don't know that I felt like they were dominating or controlling more than a handful of snaps. It seemed like it was, on our offense that wasn't having things work. So I felt like they actually had one of their best games today, even though we lost.
Yeah, I thought the offensive lines played pretty well here the last month almost. I didn't love how they started the season, but I do think they're starting to gel. I think this goes back to a lot of what Eric talks about when early on people are calling for DeCoste because we just don't like the guy, and we're calling for him because we like the idea of Teller because he pancaked some guys in preseason. We're just like, hey, let's just throw Teller in. He's more like Richie Incognito. Eric was over there saying, well, big part of offensive line and is the chemistry. And I think that we're seeing that kind of come to fruition right now is that takes time to develop. Communication and chemistry are big and important on the offensive line. I think they are developing some. I'm not going to go out there and say they're really a strength of this team moving forward, but today I think they were the strength of the offensive unit. I do think, though, they still killed the Bills with some of the pre-snap penalties. A few of those were on the offensive line. There was a illegal formation that was on Deion Dawkins. That's a killer penalty. Just some of the pre-snap stuff. They got to clean that up. I don't know what they got to do to clean that up, but I do agree with you. Offensive line looked pretty great today against maybe one of their toughest challenges yet. I don't think we're going to have many more challenges like we faced through this first 6 weeks.
We've got Chicago and Jacksonville coming up. So out of the last 10 games, I think we have 2 above average defenses in my mind.
Yeah.
So it's certainly Chicago and Jacksonville are both excellent, but the rest of the eight of the remaining 10 are actually fairly, average or below average defenses. So now that doesn't really matter with our offense, but at least it's not going to be because there's some dominating defense.
But thank God we don't have to go up against our defense. Let's talk about these guys because I don't know where the stats are right now. I know they were in the top 10 going into the week. I think you might be able to start making a conversation that this is a top 5, if not right outside of the top 5 defense in the whole NFL. Where are you at overall on this Leslie Frazier's defensive unit?
I don't know how you can be anything but ecstatic. We held Deshaun Watson was the first quarterback in history to go for 300 yards and 30 yards rushing in 4 straight games. He had been over 375 for 3 straight games. They were the number 1 rushing team in the NFL up until week 4. So holding them to 216 total yards is dominating. I mean, that is a world-class defensive effort. I say it every week. The Bills are phenomenal at bringing 4 for pressure, but the offense doesn't know which 4. And that's the key. We don't have to blitz, and then we're able to drop 7 into coverage every single play, but we get pressure because the defense doesn't know which 4 are coming. And when you line that up, and you look at it all the time, they have 6-7 guys lined up across the line of scrimmage, including 2 linebackers right up there in the A-gap blitz, and then you don't know who's going to drop and who's going to come. And we saw another safety blitz get home with Raphael Bush. You saw tons of disruption from the defensive line. You saw Milano in there on some awesome run fits. I think you have to be really, really encouraged. I've seen some people that I think rightfully are concerned, hey, are we wasting a great defense with this offense? And I mean, in one sense, yes. I think that we are going to have after today, probably a top 5 defense in the NFL. So there's reason to concern, hey, would this have been a great season to also have an offense? Sure. But I'll also say, short of, like I joked about the old men, the vast majority of our defense is young, early in their contract, and going to be here for the next 2 to 3 years. So we have a lot of players who are there that I think across the board, obviously at the high level, you have the, Tre'Davious White, Tremaine Edmonds, your Matt Milano. On the defensive line with the contracts that are there, we're going to see Star Latulippe, Harrison Phillips, heck, I hope Jordan Phillips comes back. Jerry Hughes has another year or two in him. I think the play that we're seeing from Trent Murphy has looked solid. Those kind of things are all players that are going to be here. Jordan Poyer and Hyde, having that kind of depth around you. Taron Johnson looks like a long-term nickel play. So I think that we have, heck, 9 of the 15 pieces you need on defense long-term that are going to be there for the long haul. So I think that although it's frustrating that we are probably going to have a playoff and championship caliber defense this year, our offense is simply not going to make that matter to the extent that it should. I don't think it's necessary to be concerned that we're wasting a defense per se, because I think that they're going to be there over the long haul, and that when the offense catches up, we could be really good.
Yeah, it is difficult. I understand some of what people are saying. It's difficult to sustain a top level defense multiple years in a row. But I don't think that the drop off is going to be significant. So say they finish in the top 10 this year when the season's done. I think that they'll still be in that top 10 to 15 conversation next year, even if they say lose a Kyle Williams or whatever it is. I think that, like you said, they have the young pieces. If they can keep Leslie Frazier around, that type of continuity is important. I know Bills fans have heard the word continuity a lot, and we'd never end up actually getting it. But I think it's going to be important moving forward. But one thing you talked about too with fans thinking we're wasting this, there aren't many teams that don't run into the same problem almost every single season. I'd say half the league has this issue where one of the sides of the ball is better than the other. That's why you see constantly coaches that get fired, offensive coaches, and they bring in a defensive coach because they got to get the defensive side of the ball wasn't working or whatever it is. So this is very common problem in the NFL of good one units and the other units not making up for it. There might be a handful of teams that have 2 units and have put a lot of money into the teams that are making a Super Bowl run right now. That's probably 5-6 teams that are solid on both units and in the top 10 discussion on both sides. So I don't know. I'm not super worried about that. They're wasting a defense. It's the only thing that's getting me excited to watch football on Sundays.
Oh yeah. and it's legitimately exciting. It was phenomenal today. They dominated this game out of, you want to talk about the 6 units on the field, the Texans offense, defense, special teams, the Bills offense, defense, special teams. The Bills defense was by far the best unit of any of the 6 on the field. They were phenomenal and dominated that game from start to finish. Besides, honestly, I guess you want to give, some even-handed commentary. The final drive, they led up some plays on the final drive. I know a couple people in the chat had good questions about, how do you let Phillip Gaines even get one-on-one? I'd like to look at the all-22. I know there was some defensive attention and safety help on almost every play over towards DeAndre Hopkins. So letting Phillip Gaines get one-on-one, we don't have any athlete on defense that can go stride for stride with Will Fuller. He's one of the best deep threats in the NFL. So letting that happen was a miss. Then when he gets there, yes, obviously playing the ball is better, but his choice was interfere with him or give up a touchdown. So I guess I'll take the interference versus giving up the touchdown. But, beyond that final drive, they were dominant the entire time. And then, they give up what, if we get a little bit better bounce or he turns his head around and makes a play on the ball, maybe we're in a different position.
Yeah, and even on that final drive, they still stood strong at the end. So while the pass interference didn't give up,
yeah, it's a great point.
They put it down. The one that ended up being a smart play in hindsight because they didn't give up the 7 right there. So, but I do agree that it's a tough position to put Gaines in. Not a huge fan of Gaines, but it is what it is. I think that what maybe they were thinking in the moment, again, without having the all-22, is almost every time Watson was dropping back, there was pressure. throughout the entire game. So I think what they were thinking is, if he's going to take a deep shot, he's going to have to get through our pressure. And I think that what Leslie Frazier's thinking is, I'm taking this all day because our defensive line is getting there and they're creating pressure. And I think even if I remember that play correctly, there was some pressure even on that play and he got the ball out. So, I mean, that's going to happen in this game. These guys are still all in the NFL. I think overall, though, the defense did enough to win regardless of that play happening and Gaines being one-on-one in that situation. When you hold a team, obviously they end up scoring more than 20, but when you hold a team under 20 in the NFL through 3, 4 and more quarters, you got to win the game. It's as simple as that. So I've seen a lot of questions too. I haven't seen it in the chat tonight, but talking about Ryan Lewis not being an inactive today, that's something I want to address because obviously they didn't need him today. And I think that this might be like the Brandon Riley or the Jeff Toole of this year. Fans are falling in love with Ryan Lewis and I just don't see it. I mean, I'm not knocking the guy. I think he's probably fine. He's a good developmental guy. Why are fans falling in love with this guy? Why am I seeing it all over my Twitter?
I said it 2 weeks ago. There was such a weird window into him. Fans saw him make a bunch of tackles and then break up 2 passes. You want to know why he made a bunch of tackles and broke up 2 passes? Aaron Rodgers was picking on him relentlessly. He had given up 8 straight completions for like 120 yards. And yes, he made the tackle on some of those completions that then on the 9th and the 10th play that Rodgers was going back to him again, he did bat one down and then he almost had a pick 6. Well, yeah, because he was picking on you because he felt you were embarrassing. So, don't get me wrong, I think he has some potential. I'm glad he's on the roster. I hope. I do think one very positive thing from Frazier and McDermott and the coaching staff is they've shown the propensity to develop talent in the secondary and to coach that. So someone I know in here, Thomas had commented that he has 4.3 speed. He has a nice build. I'm totally fine with him being on the roster and being there, but assuming that he's ready to be some contributing starting caliber player, I think is probably foolish, and that I don't know that he's in there and all of a sudden makes a play. He probably gets turned around on that play and then is trying to play catch up, and we probably give up a touchdown to Fuller instead of even interfering with him. So, it is what it is. I'm fine with him being on the roster, but him not being out there instead of Gaines is not a difference in the game.
Yeah, no, I don't think so at all either. And I'd be surprised how many games. I think he is not on the roster more games than he is, obviously barring injuries. But a cornerback that we have to talk about because I saw people getting a little worried. He got picked on a couple times early, but it wasn't much. It was a tough matchup. But Tre'Davious White, man, he is incredible. Even on that touchdown, that ball was put in a place where cornerbacks can't get to it. That catch was an unbelievable catch by Hopkins, showing off his hand strength. And White was all over it. He did get a hand on it, even though it's a difficult place to get a hand on. He made that a tough catch, but he was all over Hopkins all day long. Another great performance out of White. I know Mike Rodak had said something about the Hopkins full stat line, and Trey White's kind of snapped back before deleting it, saying, well, if you go check it, he only got 2 catches on me for whatever. That's impressive, man, to go up against DeAndre Hopkins and only allow 2 catches. And I know one's a touchdown, but he did everything he could to make it not.
Yeah, I don't know how you could have any frustration. He just took, I think, very, very easily arguable, the best receiver in the NFL. He's not the best athlete in the NFL, but he's probably the best wide receiver in the NFL. He is phenomenal, ridiculous hands like you saw on that touchdown. And they had to scheme their mind out to get him away from Trey. I know that I think Trey was active on Twitter after the game. I saw him actually going back at Mike Rodak. I think you pointed that out. So as far as Trey's concerned, he had 2 catches for 30 yards while he was guarding him. So Trey was very proud of that. And again, that touchdown was an absolutely perfect throw that he high pointed with a snag hand catch that I don't think there's any defender that is stopping that throw. So it's it's something that I think that he was excellent and really controlled what could have been an out of control game. 5 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown is one of the lesser DeAndre Hopkins games in the last couple of years, and 2 catches for 30 yards on Trey is a victory in my book. So I'm perfectly comfortable with the job he did and the unbelievable contributions he makes.
Yeah, and I have a little bit of a hot take here that somebody's going to have to write down and remind me of later, but I think Trey White's an all-pro this year in his second year in the league. If he continues on the path that he's been against some of the top competition that he's played against and shutting guys down week in and week out, I don't know how they keep him out of it. What are your thoughts on that hot take of mine?
It's pretty hot. My computer got a little warm.
It's melty, man.
My hands back. No, I will say he's obviously going to get dinged, just like he deserved Rookie of the Year last year and didn't get it because it was a better story in New Orleans. He's not going to get all pro because he plays for the Bills, and we are, have the least talented roster in the NFL. I do think that he's probably got a shot at a Pro Bowl, and I think that puts him in a position to get people's minds around the fact that he's of that level, and then we may see him there in the future years. But I think from a grading standpoint, there's a chance he earns that this year.
Yeah, I think maybe he doesn't win it, but he's at that level if he can continue this pace. And I think that's the conversation where you can start talking about that this guy is an all-pro potential player on defense, which is incredible to know that you have him for another 3 years after this on a rookie deal. Going back to your point about this defense, is there anyone else specifically that you wanted to talk about? I know we talked about the old men. We've talked about kind of all the individual pieces here on the defense. Was there any specific other things outside of the play of the unit as a whole that you wanted to touch on here before we move on?
No, I think that they obviously, like I said, they dominated the game. They 7 sacks is ridiculous. That's a fantastic game, plus another 4 other tackles for loss. They did everything they could possibly do and then some to put us in a position to win.
Well, with that, let's talk about the guy that was my lead disgruntled before Nathan Peterman came and blew the game apart. Danny Crossman and the special teams unit. Obviously, there were some highlights from your boy Bojorquez. Bojorquez had a good game. He really did. Again, we're starting to expect it. I think we're seeing nice things out of him. But outside of that, man, there really wasn't anything to be excited about this special teams unit. With penalties 2 weeks in a row that this unit's giving up offside penalties when you have to stand there on kickoffs now, that is ridiculous to me. That there's no scenario where there's any acceptable answer as to why that type of thing's happening.
I'll say within the special teams world, there are a couple of things that I think are impacted by coaching and a couple of things that are just individual skill level. The actual kicking of the ball by the kicker on kickoffs and field goals and the actual kicking of the ball by the punter is simply the skill level of the guy. That those are professionals that have made it to this level. Maybe there's a tweak here or there that the coach helps them on, but for the most part, that's just how good that guy is. The other, the alignment, the creative blocking on the returns, the, being able to set things up, that's on the coaching. The only 2 redeemable factors of our special teams are the guys kicking the ball. Steven Hauschka is phenomenal. Corey Bojorquez, although he's a rookie and has had some weird jitters, 95% of the time has been phenomenal. He averaged, almost 50 yards a punt today and put, everything into the right spot for us. So they did everything that you could possibly ask for. I don't think we've had one impressive return all season. We've now given up multiple blocks that we've had kicks, get through our blocking in our setup in the special teams, blocking units. We've been in a position where we're constantly having penalties. Anytime we have something relatively positive, it comes back, or even when it's normal, we get a penalty cutting us back half the distance to the goal. So with an offense that's already limited, we can't afford to have that. And to have, I think 4 of the penalties today, we had 10 penalties, 4 of them on special teams. That's crazy.
It is crazy. And Thomas says Crossman can't make players not be offsides, or he can make them field kicks. That's true. To your point, he can't make the guys execute things. I think the offsides thing is a coaching error because you're not moving. It's pretty basic stuff on the kickoffs now, right? You can't move until the ball's kicked. So the fact that it continues to happen is that these players, it's not getting drilled in. I don't know what they have to do to make that happen, but also with this Crossman thing, this isn't in a vacuum of 1 year. We're talking about multiple years with Danny Crossman, multiple regimes that he has been as a special teams coordinator for this team. And year in and year out, special teams penalties has been a problem for this team as long as Danny Crossman has been here. So to me, that says it's not just the player, because the players have come and gone. And yes, the players make mistakes and the coaches can't always keep the players from making some of these penalties and dumb. But when you have this long of a resume of one guy being there and these penalties happening, Eric Wood tweeted it out, I think early week 1 or something, saying about how defeating it is for the offense to go out after a punt return and you're back half the distance to the goal, and how many times that happened during his time here. It's defeating to the whole team. And I'm not a guy that gets too mad or down on coaches, but I'm pretty frustrated with the product that we're getting from Danny Crossman overall.
Yeah, and I will say the one thing we saw was, although, I think McDermott strikes everyone as a loyal person, we did see multiple moves this offseason where, he did, bring in new offensive coordinator. I think that's one area we'll see additional steps this year. I know that both Reptile, want to give him a shout out, listening from Australia. That's awesome. Thomas and a couple other guys in here talking about how, do we have the right coaches in place? I do think that we're going to see Dable be able to bring in some of his position guys. I think some of the timing of that this offseason, it happened a little bit later. We were going through the process there. I think a fair amount of other guys had already been hired. We finally had the situation where being in the playoffs actually hurt us in being able to be a little bit behind, a week behind in the coaching search. So I do think that we'll see some changes there. And honestly, I think that we'll see some changes from Danny Crossman. He's now survived multiple coaching staffs, and obviously results speak, and we're simply not seeing the results we need from a special team standpoint. So I hope that we see multiple areas turn around there. I hope we see multiple new coaches, and I think we'll see that on the offensive side and on special teams.
Yeah, this season is the most that I've had to talk about special teams on these post-game shows, doing them, and that to me is a problem. I don't want to have to talk about special teams. I just want them to go out there and perform and play the way they can. The only time I want to talk about them is crazy great punts and really nice house money field goals. And other than that, I don't really want to bring up the unit. And the fact that we keep having to bring up this unit and it's a bad team on the offensive side of the ball, when special teams plays as poorly as they do, it just really puts the team in a tough position to even consider winning games. And yeah, I'm done there. I do think the coaching staff's pretty good overall, though. To answer that, I think if they can keep Frazier, if this defense is in the top 5 or so, it might be tough to hang on to Leslie Frazier long term. He has head coaching experience. I know he's not a hot coaching candidate, but we don't know how many jobs will come available. I'd like to hope that they can just hide him in Buffalo and nobody pays attention to us and keep him here, because I think they got a nice thing going. And I agree with you that Dable is going to probably have this offseason to bring in some guys that are more his guys. And hopefully one of those is a quarterback coach, because I don't know why Cully is there doing that. I don't know how that happened, but
I mean, I get being creative sometimes, and I questioned it at the time that, hey, we're taking a 20-year wide receivers coach, and I know he's been in those kind of passing game offensive planning sessions, but it's a little bit of a reach assuming he's ready to be a quarterback coach. But okay, I think that's obviously proven that I don't think he's there. I don't think it's a direct indictment with the signing of Derek Anderson, but I think it's an indicator that they needed that additional experienced voice in the room, that they have a guy that's made NFL throws and was similarly I think a similar build and, a big arm, but not a lot of touch, a guy that can give that kind of real tangible experience to Josh Allen. So I don't think that's a direct indictment on Cully, but it certainly wasn't a positive that they needed to do that. So I do expect to see some changes there, and hopefully the autonomy. I know I got into it with a couple guys in the chat here. I'm a bigger fan of Eric Dable than many are. Or Brian Dable. I like Brian Dable. I think he has a good offensive mind. I think he's very limited by the lack of weapons that we have. And I'm actually kind of happy that we're not going to have that same conversation you just did about Leslie Frazier. Obviously, he's not going to be getting a head coaching job this offseason. I think we have a shot at a nice 3-year window together where he's there with Josh Allen, building, bringing in some more of his coaches this offseason, bringing in some weapons that he endorses and is supportive by, and that we're going to be able to build that and be able to go towards that in the future. Grendel's in the chat is really excited about Brian Daboll and is probably his number one fan. So we'll look forward to seeing where they go in the future.
Yeah, and I would say also that with Daboll, I don't think that you can take a look at his numbers and success of this offense and make that indictment of him and his abilities. I've seen really nice play calling out of him at times, and I think he's super limited, like I said. So don't worry about all that. I think Daboll is going to be just fine. All right, to wrap this up, we got the Colts next week. We're going to talk about them on Wednesday here on the show. Is this a chance for them to keep bouncing back, or are they just going to kind of slide into this hole of who we've thought they were all along?
I mean, honestly, short of maybe we play Chicago at home. I think we play Jacksonville on the road, and then the 2 games against the Patriots. I don't see any game the rest of the season out of those. I'll say that obviously both games against the Patriots, we're going to be underdogs for a significant reason. On the road in Jacksonville, we're going to be an underdog. Every other game, we're going to be relatively in. We're going to be there, and we're going to have, if we have, again, our recipe, if we get some positive turnover differential, we get a couple positive plays, the penalties are in our favor, we're going to have a shot. I think the Colts are not that far off from us, where they're a flawed roster with a couple good pieces and some young guys that are excited about, but an awful lot of flaws. So if they get the ball bouncing their way, we make a couple dumb penalties and turnovers, they can beat us. If we go in there and we make some good plays, our defense is obviously good enough to get to Andrew Luck and to make that a difficult game for them. So I walk into that game not terribly different than I do today. I thought that we'd have a good shot, or the same as the Tennessee game. I think that we're going to be in position to be competitive. We're going to be in position that if we get some positive things going, we're going to be in good shape. I will say, if Josh Allen is out, and this is not a short-term bruise, contusion type injury, I am very afraid of what that would mean. Is Derek Anderson up to speed soon enough to get into the game? God forbid we have to let Nathan Peterman get out there again. I've been very vocal that I was frustrated we did not release or waive him going into this game, and that I wanted to see him brought back on the practice squad. He's so toxic that no other team is going to have the press conference explaining that they signed Nathan Peterman. So I think that we could keep him on the 63 guys that show up for practice every day, and that we'd be able to be out there, playing. It's just, is Derek Anderson physically ready after not being in an NFL training camp? And is he up to speed to be able to be ready to go? I have my doubts that they're going to take that risk on 8 or 9 days notice here, but I'm hopeful that they do. And long term, I certainly hope that Nathan Peterman's no longer on this active roster, and that if we have this, obsession with keeping him around, it's only on the practice squad.
Well, let's just hope that the Rocket didn't get dinged up too badly here this weekend. We don't have to have that conversation next week. Where can the people here that are seeing your beautiful hairline for the first time, where can they find you at?
You can find me on Twitter having similar arguments and debates at Greg Thompsett, GregTompsett. I think that we have a chance to be able to have some fun. I love to follow back Bills fans, have a good time. So find me on there, and I'll be happy to follow you back, and we can have a good time about what's going on during the week.
Yeah, and you can find me over Aaron Quinn 716. If you thought my takes are high here, you haven't seen nothing yet. Wait till you get at me on Twitter. But you can also find me primarily over in the Cover One Slack channel. This is a place for only premium members. So if you head over to cover1.net, take a look at the premium memberships. Totally worth it. $25 for the year gets you access to the premium content, and the access to the Slack channel alone is worth it to me. It's ripping on game day. It's a ton of fun all week long. I enjoy it much more than I enjoy the interactions that I get on Twitter. A lot of the time they can be mind numbing. I do like Twitter, and I'll interact with anybody that's out there. But the Slack channel is just fantastic, worth the membership in itself. Plus you get access to the premium content, the film room that Eric does. You get all that stuff. Eric, in the Slack channel itself, Eric has a film channel where you share stuff and we discuss that stuff. You get to talk to Eric directly about what you're seeing and what the plays are being drawn up. And he gets that to the premium members first before it hits the open market, if you will. So definitely worth checking out cover1.net. If you're here over at YouTube and this is your first time, head back over to the page, subscribe, hit that little notification bell while you're there, because that is actually how you subscribe nowadays. And that'll notify you when we go live. We go live every Wednesday and Sunday evening after the game. The Wednesday show, we talk about the opposing team. We try to get a reporter on from that team and get you guys caught up on those guys. If anything happens, we do an emergency podcast. So you'll get that little notification. So subscribe and like that. And keep coming back, guys. It could be a long season. We might be in for a long haul of some tough games and some bad games, but keep coming back because we can't do this without you, the fans. You guys keep us going, and we really appreciate it. And we'll catch you next week, guys. Enjoy the rest of your week.